So Resident Evil has been on my mind a lot lately. It's a series I've always been aware of and I've played from time to time, but I never got far enough into any of the games to really get super invested in the story or the characters, either because I found them too difficult or I just played them when I was too young and I was too scared to finish them. But recently I've been playing a lot of the Ori 2 remake and Village, and they're the first games in the series I've actually finished, so now I'm going back to play the other games in the series and it's become a new obsession of mine. So since I had Resident Evil on the brain, it didn't take too long before I started thinking about the movie franchise. I'd only ever seen the first 3 movies in full, and my only exposure to the later films in the series was that one Red Letter Media video.
This is borderline experimental. This makes no sense at all.
But it had been well over a decade since I'd seen the first movie, and I actually remember liking it at the time, though I was in my early teens and I liked a lot of really crappy movies back then. And even at the time, I always found that I was way more positive towards it than most people, so I thought it would be fun to take a dive into the first movie in the series and see if teenage me was onto something, or if this is just another instance of my garbage brain. So let's find out. I do recommend seeing the movie before watching this video, but here's a brief summary for anyone who couldn't be arsed. Resident Evil takes place in a bioweapons research facility called The Hive, which just had itself a zombie outbreak courtesy of this mysterious person who unleashed the zombie virus on the unsuspecting employees after stealing some samples. This causes the Hive's AI, the Red Queen, to take drastic measures to contain the virus by killing everyone inside. Interrupted your once phone call and all. Rude. Sometime later, a team of soldiers, a police officer and a pair of amnesiac security guards are tasked with infiltrating the Hive, shutting down the Red Queen and finding out what happened down there. There are a few plot twists here and there too, but I'll get to those later. There are a lot of characters introduced in the first half, but there are only a couple of them that are worth mentioning. Our protagonist is Alice, played by Milla Jovovich. She has amnesia, so she just spends most of the movie wandering around looking confused. Same for the other amnesiac, Spence. Then we have the police officer, Matt. He's not very interesting, but he will be important later. You might be noticing a theme here. Then there's the leader, One, who is only noteworthy because he's played by Colin Salmon, who also played Dr. Moon in 2 very good episodes of Doctor Who. Then there's Kaplan, the soft boy of the group. Kind of incompetent, but he means well. And finally we have Rain, played by Michelle Rodriguez, who is...
Blow me.
Well, she's Michelle Rodriguez, very much one of the lads. I don't actively dislike any of these characters, but Rain is the only one I actually do quite like, mostly because Michelle Rodriguez seems to be having a lot of fun playing the character and it really shows.
I mean, it's like being a kid and playing Commando. Only thing you never had the realistic toys, like, machine guns with dummy bullets in them and, crazy little gadgets and gears that you get to, put on.
The movie opens with some expository narration which fills us in on the background of the Umbrella Corporation. Right off the bat, this doesn't bode well. I often find this kind of thing unnecessary since there are probably better ways to convey this information in the movie itself, but it's pretty brief so I'm not too bothered by it. And anyway, we transition into a pretty cool opening shot and main theme. The score was composed by Marco Beltrami, who's probably most well known for scoring the Scream series, and Marilyn fucking Manson of all people. And their score is pretty good, even if it sounds profoundly 2002 with all of its nu metal guitar sounds. Paul W.S. Anderson wanted a score that was reminiscent of early John Carpenter music, and I could definitely get that vibe from this main theme, although it's the only part of the score where I do. In the mansion on the surface, we're introduced to our many characters and they start making their way towards the Hive. Rain sees a broken grate and hears some spooky sounds, which suggests that there's something down there with them, which makes no sense because the Hive is still locked down at this point, and this leads into a fake-out jump scare.
Jumpy.
This is an example of a problem that's present throughout the first half of this movie. There are a lot of scares that are completely unmotivated and serve no purpose, and it's not just in this movie either, it's something that you see pretty often in horror movies, and it's a pet peeve of mine. Other examples of this include Alice getting scared by, I guess, the wind, and Matt staring ominously at this vent which he suspects has something spooky in it despite it being a totally normal vent. So those are pretty annoying, but we also get a couple of solid jump scares when this submerged zombie floats by.
Which is a possibility.
Jesus. And again after the team walk away. So it almost balances out. And it's a good thing those jump scares worked out because they weren't easy for the actress Anna Ball to pull off.
It's because Anna Ball, the actress that we had to do this with, she never scuba dived before. Not only am I teaching her how to use scuba equipment, but in the film, she has to go under the water 3 meters, take the equipment off. She's weighted down with weights on a board so we can roll her to the screen.
And that brings us to the best sequence in the movie. The team reach the Hive's control room, and the only thing standing between them and their goal is this corridor, which is very normal and not dangerous at all. One and a few other red shirts enter the corridor, which immediately locks them in and starts throwing a bunch of lasers at them. Red shirt number 1 gets his finger sliced off, while red shirt number 2 gets fucking decapitated. When the laser comes back for another pass, red shirt number 1 gets Darth Mauled. That just leaves one, who uses some sick parkour to avoid the laser until... To get the shot of one falling to pieces, they actually built a full-scale model of Colin Salmon, which was split into pieces and rigged to fall apart on cue. The model actually looks really good, but in the final edit it looks like it was covered up with CGI. In the behind the scenes footage it looks like the model was falling apart very quickly, so I suspect they went with CGI because they wanted the pieces to fall away from each other a bit more gradually. It does look pretty bad, but it's out of focus, so I guess it could have looked a lot worse. But it's a shame that all the hard work that went into building the model went to waste in the end, but that aside I still think this is a great sequence. And this is also the point where we get rid of most of the extraneous characters and the movie really kicks into gear for me. The remaining team shuts down the Red Queen.
You're all going to die down here.
And in doing so reset all the security measures, meaning that all the doors are unlocked. Here we're introduced to the zombies through these ominous shots of empty hallways, only hearing distant growls and some reflections and shadows on the walls. This might be my favourite moment in the movie, and it's the only part that really captures the more eerie and foreboding elements of the games. We should not get used to this subtlety though. Rain immediately gets bitten by the first zombie she sees.
You seem to be in some sort of...
The rest of the zombies shuffle in, and again the way they're introduced with close-ups and POV shots is great. We get this one close-up of this guy walking on one bent ankle, which I feel like is a reference to Zombie Flyboy from Dawn of the Dead. The zombies' makeup effects were overseen by SFX makeup supervisor Pauline Fowler, and I think they looked great. When deciding on the look for the zombies, the SFX team wanted to avoid looking like your average Romero zombie, and instead used real dead bodies as a reference to ensure that all the wounds and skin discolorations and the like were all medically accurate, and that decision definitely paid off. However, again, some of the prosthetics seem to have been covered up with CGI. While I was researching, I couldn't find a reason for why they insisted on doing this, probably budgetary or time constraints, which is understandable but disappointing nonetheless. The ensuing firefight, and most of the movie too, was filmed in Berlin in an abandoned U-Bahn station under the Reichstag building. The stunt team went all out for this sequence, especially when it came to the fire stunts, with one stuntman burning over 20 times for one shot. In fact, everyone seems to have done some fire stunts for this scene. Eric Mabius did one, even the bloody DOP did one while operating the camera at the same time. Red shirt number 3 opens a security door with some very poorly synced dialogue.
Got it. See how easy that was?
He immediately dies and Rain gets bitten again. She just can't catch a break. While all this is going on, Alice is off on her own somehow and encounters one of the most iconic creatures from the games, the zombie dogs. Or just some regular dogs covered in spaghetti. Yeah, the human zombie makeup looks great. Zombie dogs, not so much. The entire cast received a few weeks of military and martial arts training before shooting began, but Milla Jovovich's training was the most intensive as her character did the most fighting by far, and this is where we get our first look at it. I feel like they envisioned this moment being way cooler than it actually turned out. Those poor dogs had to endure getting put in makeup for this. That is the face of a dog that is about to die of embarrassment. Ready for plot twist number 1? Well, remember that lady on the phone earlier? Well, it turns out she was actually Matt's sister, Lisa, who met with Alice to try to expose Umbrella's illegal experiments to the world by stealing the T-virus samples, but it looks like Alice might have only gone and betrayed her. Fuck's sake, Alice. Pretty decent twist, right? Just wait. We're getting near the end of the movie now, and it just wouldn't be Resident Evil without a literal ticking clock to escape the lab. They just have an hour to get out before the lab is sealed shut again. They head to the sewer level and they get swarmed pretty much immediately, and Rain gets bitten a fourth time. Jesus, Rain's having an awful time of it. And she wasn't the only one. Filming this sequence was a big pain in the arse for the crew. Cramped conditions meant that there was very little room to manoeuvre the crew and their equipment around. They had crew members on climbing equipment and wire rigs, and in some shots they even had the camera running along a set of dolly tracks above the actors' heads, which were disguised as pipes. And it wasn't easy for the actors either.
You know, being in these contained environments with so many people snarling and the noise and everything, it's overwhelming.
There was a time when it seemed to get worse and worse and worse, and we were down in the sewers and then just above the pipes with all the zombies below, and I just every day we go, is this ever going to get better?
After making it out of the sewers, we get a face full of some very 2002 editing to show us that Spence is having some serious memories right now. Turns out Alice and Lisa got double spied by Spence, who then took it upon himself to steal the samples and went one step further by deliberately releasing the virus into the facility for some reason. So the plan was to steal some samples and use them to expose Umbrella's illegal experiments to the world, right? Well, that sounds like a solid enough plan to me, but I guess Spence was thinking that a better plan would be to steal the samples and also kill everyone in the facility. I don't know, man, it's very flimsy. It actually feels like their starting point was Guy deliberately releases virus into the hive, and then they tried to reverse engineer a reason why from there. The right screenwriter can make that kind of thing work from time to time, but Paul W.S. Anderson was not that screenwriter, and Spence's whole motivation to cause the outbreak is super weak. It seems like he wanted to help Alice and Lisa take down Umbrella, but even if he didn't, they would have no way of knowing that he was behind it all, so he could have just said nothing and you would have been grand. It's very dumb that he's just acting all evil now.
I wouldn't want to shoot you. You might need the bullets.
Hey, someone's played Resident Evil before. And with that, he legs it. He flees to the train, but before he can do much of anything, he gets hopped by the licker, the rest of the group watching a security monitor as he gets out. Also, this is a minor point, but does anyone else think that this shot makes Matt look like he has tiny legs? No? Just me? Alright, moving on. The others get to the platform and find Zombie Spence looking amazingly intact for someone who just got munched on by a licker.
I'm missing you already.
Shame he's a zombie and couldn't appreciate that quip there, Alice. And now we have the final boss fight with the licker, which involves some very dodgy CGI. For this sequence, and most of the movie actually, the actors did nearly all their own stunts. And this was a problem for Milla Jovovich because her costume made it impossible to wear pads on her arms when doing stunt work. And that was an especially big problem in this scene, as she was being slammed against walls and dragged across metal grates. Her arms were in bits by the end of it. See those bruises on her arms? There's no makeup there. According to Paul W.S. Anderson, those are 100% real. But she fights through the pain and opens the hatch under the licker, making it crease itself off the tracks. Now finally, Matt and Alice can escape the hive and it looks like everything's going to be okay. Except a bunch of hazmat guys are here now and Matt's got some wormy things coming out of his arm.
I want him in the Nemesis program.
Fuck's sake, give them a bloody break. He gets carted off and Alice gets bonked on the head and she wakes up in yet another abandoned lab. She makes her way outside to find the streets in ruins. With the cock of her shotty, we get a really cool sweeping crane shot showing the devastation of Raccoon City. For this final shot, they put a camera on a special wire rig which, according to Paul W.S. Anderson at least, had never been used in a feature film before. One end of the wire was secured to the ground and the other to a construction crane, giving the camera much more range of motion than a traditional crane would have allowed for. And it paid off because this final shot is actually pretty class. The movie ends as we cut to a sick Slipknot song over the credits because 2002. And that's the movie. I don't think it's a controversial take to say that it's actually quite bad in a lot of ways. The writing's pretty clumsy, motivations of some of the characters don't really make sense, and actually most of the characters themselves are pretty boring. But with all that said, I actually do quite like this movie. I mean, it's not exactly high art or anything, but I get the sense that there was a real attempt to evoke the feeling of the games here. And that's not surprising given the fact that Anderson was inspired to make the movie after playing RE2. Sure, they almost completely ignored the more eerie and foreboding elements in favour of the campier stuff, and Anderson definitely put his own spin on the material, but it's an adaptation at the end of the day, and that kind of thing is bound to happen. There were a ton of video game movies in the 2000s, and almost none of them were good. And I think that's because big Hollywood studios and filmmakers didn't really take video games seriously as an art form. And I think that's still the case today, though I have a feeling that it won't be the case for much longer. So with that in mind, I really do admire what Anderson and his crew made here. I respect it more than I like it, if that makes sense. And let's be honest, Resident Evil was never exactly a bastion of great writing to begin with.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
There we go, that's it. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, subscribe, etc. There'll be more videos very soon. Thanks.